House of Mysteries.
This hotel seems to have quite a history, Mrs. Gallagher.
Who are you people?
A research team with special powers.
Oh my God.
She's experiencing the past.
Because we are all joined by our thoughts.
Has uncovered an ancient secret.
I have something I want to show you.
Metaphysically speaking, I killed myself.
But they are playing with an evil force.
What would you do with the power?
You can't save her, Alex.
They have given life to a deadly power.
We're all in danger.
And now a box of little toys
I think someone's in the room, Frank.
has become a gang of little terrors. Pinhead. Blade. Ms. Leach. Jester. And Tunneler. Irene Miracle, Paul Lamont, Barbara Crampton, and William Hickey as the Puppet Master.
Channel people, and welcome to our 154th episode of Gold Standard, the Oscars movie podcast, where we travel through time, reviewing the films that earned their gold statue, or standard if you will, and beyond. I am one of your co-hosts, DJ Nick, and as always, joining me at the Gold Standard Theatre are my two podcasting partners in crime. On one side, the professional nerd herself, Rachel Friend. Hey Rachel, how are you today?
You know what? I can't complain. I'm getting ready to get my professional nerd on because Indie PopCon is this weekend, and oh yeah, I got a dog.
Yay!
It is not taxidermied and or revived, as far as I know.
That's very good to know. But and actually, congrats on the new family member, indeed. And on the other, the Ghostwood girl, Zan Sprouse. Hey Zan, how's life treating you?
Life is pretty okay. I mean, I don't have any leech nightmares, so that's already a plus.
Yeah, less of those leech nightmares, the better. And speaking of which, the reason why we're here today, returning to the podcast, is my partner in crime on Happiness and Darkness, Mr. Keith Bliss. Hey, Keith, how are you today?
So this is what the upper class is like. I wouldn't know. I mean, I'm doing good, I guess. I'm not having any leech nightmares, but to be fair, I have a little bald man running around my house all the time. So it is what it is.
It most certainly is what it is. We're very happy to have you back with us, Keith, because today we are reviewing a movie that you selected, which is, of course, Puppet Master. This was directed by David Schmuller. It was written by Kenneth J. Hall and Joseph G. Corladi, while the score was by Richard Band. On an estimate, put in today's money, adjusted for inflation, this movie cost $1 million to make and was not released to theaters, so therefore no box office returns, as it was decided to go direct-to-video, and it did appear direct-to-video on October the 12th of 1989, and has a runtime of roughly 1 hour and 30 minutes. So, Keith, beginning with you, as you brought today's movie to the Gold Standard Theatre, what are your general impressions and thoughts on the movie that also spawned the franchise?
I mean, first, I guess I should apologize to your dear listeners because, you know, I have to bring the lowbrow stuff. But that being said, it's a fun watch. It is terrible. It is the pinnacle of B movies. This is Killer Clowns in Outer Space meets Attack of the Killer Tomatoes. And if your listeners know anything about these movies, they have exactly a good understanding of what we're about to get ourselves into. It's a guilty pleasure of mine. I love this movie. I own all of them, and you know, I enjoy watching them.
Well, I'm definitely appreciative of you for bringing this one because I'd never watched this one before. So hey, always glad to get new movies under my personal belt. And Rachel, was this the first time you sat down to watch this one, and what did you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, it was the first time I sat down and watched it. I was familiar with the franchise already. You know, obviously I was a bit young when the first one came out. So I would have been the target audience then, but as you grow up and you learn about the 80s, the horror schlock that was coming out of various studios and production houses. I mean, for a movie that It's interesting that I missed out on the discussion about Saw, but I think that Zan and I are probably going to have similar comments that she had when talking about Saw about in this movie. It doesn't really know what it wants to be. Like you can see the influences from other horror. It's a creepy hotel, so you got The Shining and you've got, in this case, puppets, but obviously killer, items that can kill you that are not human. Other humans. Obviously, you've got, killer car. Again, thanks to Stephen King. Chucky. The leeches. I mean, there's a whole thing with leeches and Stand By Me. Uh, again, Stephen King. Um, but is like it's like they had a whole bunch of ideas they thought would be good for a movie, but couldn't flesh any of them out into a feature-length movie. So then instead they were like, let's just cobble all these together and call it a story. And if we really drag out some of these scenes, some of them I'm like, yeah, they're trying to like give the suspense and stuff, but some of these scenes are just so dragged out because it's like there's a minimum you have to meet to be considered feature length to be able to call it that. It's like we need to make this movie longer. Let's just make this scene just longer. But it's like we had to like we'll get into it, but it's like they don't give us a whole lot of backstory. They don't give us a lot of motivation. It's just how do we get these people into one location and then there be bloodshed? And there's not even a lot of bloodshed, which I don't have a problem with one way or the other. As I've said, horror is not my favorite genre. I will watch it sometimes. I prefer horror that does not take itself too seriously. I think they wanted to be taken seriously, the people who made this, but unfortunately they missed the mark. It was like I spent more time either going ew or laughing the entire runtime.
The ooh factor is definitely there for sure. And Zan, you and I off air last week, last time you and I talked, we're talking about my love for Lovecraft. This is, of course, very different. What did you make of this? I know you'd watched this before, but it'd been a hot minute since you'd watched it.
It had been a hot minute. I've said before that home video was the best thing that ever happened to horror movies because in the 1980s, video stores needed content, and horror was a very popular genre with people checking out horror movies. So the direct-to-video market for horror has some gems in it, and this one is so adorable. It's so endearing. And Rachel's right, it doesn't quite know what it wants to be. It's part 80s slasher, it's part 70s gothic horror that is inspired by Agatha Christie, where a bunch of people meet in a large house in a large hotel when weird things are going on. And it's part Egyptian curse, which was a thing in the 70s and 80s, just curses in general. And at the end of the day, it's Hellraiser with puppets. And the puppets are very endearing. There's something endearing about the puppets. And what did I do after watching this movie for this podcast? I watched the second one. And there's more puppets. And there's more backstory. And it's very similar to our discussion about Saw, is that it starts to explain itself as it spirals out with its sequels. The interesting thing about it is that I can't quite figure out who the puppet master is. Is the puppet master the Egyptian that came up with the spell? Is the puppet master William Hickey, which is kind of who I think it's supposed to be because he made the puppets. But we only get, 10 minutes of William Hickey at most before he shoots himself in the head? And that's another thing it wants to be. Um, the sort of horror former Nazi situation where the Nazis are looking for him. which is probably going off of the trope that we'd seen before, especially in things like Raiders of the Lost Ark, that Hitler's interested in the occult and magic. So it wants to do a lot of things, but it doesn't really give you a great explanation as to why everything's there. But at the same time, all of our characters are somehow psychic. So it sort of makes sense because not everything goes, anything goes in the world of extrasensory ESP type of thing. Um, and we do, again, we have that sort of Agatha Christie last act where we explain everything. And does it really make sense? Not necessarily, but there's just something really endearing about this. And like I said, the vibe this always gave me was Hellraiser with puppets. You know, you opened the diary, we came, that kind of thing. So it's an enjoyable watch. Is it a great movie? There's good people did good stuff. You know, I like other Charles Band movies that aren't great movies, but it's endearing. That's the best way I can put it.
I definitely think endearing is a great way to describe it. And I would also say it's interesting we bring up Saw a lot because obviously, granted, we did review it on this podcast, but there are quite a few similarities, I think, between Saw and this. And there is something quietly unsettling about this film. And it doesn't come from loud shocks or elaborate spectacle. I think it comes from the idea itself. You know, the slow realization that control can slip away in ways that feel almost intimate. Because the film leans into that unease and it doesn't rush, it lingers. And what stands out most, at least to me, is how small everything feels. The setting, like Saw, is very contained, almost claustrophobic. And that tightness, I think, gives the story a kind of pressure. You're not distracted by scale. You're made to focus on the details, on the movements, on the sense that something is always just slightly off. And it builds tension, I think, not by overwhelming you, but by narrowing your attention until you can't look away. And there's also, I think, this strange contrast between innocence and menace. You know, the central concept plays with objects that should feel harmless, even nostalgic, yet they're given intent and purpose and something close to personality. And that clash, I think, creates a kind of quiet dread. It's not chaos, it's deliberate, controlled, and I think that makes it more disturbing. At the same time, the film carries a certain roughness. You can feel its budget limitations, but I think instead of weakening it, that rough edge adds to its charm. There is a handmade quality to it, like something assembled with care rather than polished to perfection. And it fits the story. It makes the world feel tangible, almost tactile. And I think underneath everything, there is a thread about power and ownership. Who controls what, and what happens when that control becomes unstable? And the film doesn't spell it out. It just lets the idea sit there, quietly unsettling as events unfold. And by the end, I think what stood with me the most isn't any single moment. It's the mood. That lingering sense that something small, something easily overlooked, might not be as harmless as it seems. So once again, as I was saying, Keith, I'm glad that you brought this to our attention because I'd never seen this, and I'm glad I did. So let's get to our characters on the board, starting with our final guy and gal. We have Paul Lamatt, who we recently talked about in American Graffiti as Alex Whitaker, and Robin Freites as Megan Gallagher. So, Keith, starting with you, what did you make of Alex and Megan?
Oh, they're terrible. And that's why I like it. They're okay for the context of this movie. You know, Paul, he has done some really good work, and then he's done this. And they're definitely two different ships, as it were. And in this one, I think this was more of just, I'm here for a paycheck. I got to go through the motions. I got to do what I got to do. And you see that in many of the scenes. There's not a lot of chemistry with these individuals. It's more of like, I have to say this line and she's going to respond to me and I'm going to do this thing and we're going to continue on. And I'm going to have this really janky dialogue to explain why I can see dreams, but I'm going to call it magic and not psychic because that was a weird decision in the writing room. So I don't know. He's okay. And, you know, he does just enough to be dangerous. He has the same dream like 17 times, and you're just like, are we there yet? Like, is this the real one? Like, nope, nope. Okay, it's another dream. Cool. Oh, okay. Oh, we're done. Oh, nope, nope. It's another one. All right, great. So we have this one scene where he has the same dream like I don't know 3 or 4 times, and finally when it does happen, and he even what I appreciate with his character is like he's even annoyed at the fact that it's like finally happening. He's like, yeah, I know you couldn't go up here because of this. He said that. And she's like, yeah, how did you know? He's like, I told you I'm magic. Like, they had psychics. Like, people knew what psychics were. And I mean, granted, it was all, they considered them hokum back then. But the fact of the matter is, like, that was a term. He could have said, I'm psychic. And she would have, like, oh, yeah. No, it was just like she had completely forgot about the conversation they had like an hour prior. And we're just going to keep going through these same repetitive scenes over and over again. And again, he's fine. It just seemed very mechanical, not necessarily something he really wanted to do. And same thing with her. Anytime she was on screen, it felt like this was the first time she was ever acting. She's like, "Oh golly gee, gosh darn," and you're like, "Okay." Like, "Oh my goodness, I can't believe he is alive! Wow!" And you're like, "Okay, that's a little stiff, but all right, we'll go with that." That's probably like her best take of the entire movie. So it is what it is.
That is very fair. And funnily enough, I was actually having dinner with my parents this evening, and Paul Lamont showed up again, this time on Murder, She Wrote. And I'm like, wow, Paul Lamont is now part of my life, it seems. So, but moving on to you, Zan, what did you make of Alex and Megan?
Welcome to the 80s. Paul Lamont was everywhere. Yeah. Like I said, I do like Paul Lamont. When I talk about bad movie actors in bad movies that I like, I always like to see Paul Lamont show up. And Keith is right. These characters are written to seem like they are supposed to connect with each other more than anyone else that comes to the house, and that maybe there's going to be some sort of romantic thing going on with them. And even, when he's leaving, they're going to stay in touch with each other, but there really isn't a ton of chemistry, and there's not particularly a ton of backstory with Paul and Matt for sure. We have our other psychics who seem to be using their psychic abilities to, and we'll talk more about them in a minute, but using their psychic abilities in their professions. Whereas Paul and Matt's kind of just not. We just see him and he's asleep and he's having this dream, and then the squibs open up and he's got the leeches on him. But we really don't know much about who he is or where these powers sort of came from. His character reminds me a little bit of the Jeff Goldblum character in Vibes, where we have people with, extrasensory abilities coming together. But the only real thing that I think I gather from his character is almost a self-importance, but reluctance to his psychic powers by calling himself a magician and calling everybody else magicians. That there's something not just powerful, but entertaining and useful in or effect, something that has a grand effect on things. When you perform magic, you affect a lot of things, and he's not really performing magic. He's having prophetic dreams. And so that was an interesting choice of term to describe himself and the other psychics. But to have him be so, I want to say, passive with his powers, he has powers when he's sleeping. And that's about it. So to have him sort of be the hero of this, I'm not sure how that works, and how we made these decisions as to who had what psychic power. As for Megan, she is kind of a tragic character, because the more we learn about her dead husband, the more we're like, oh, we kind of hate this guy. Even with the four people that come to the whole mysterious invitation through psychic abilities and summoning, and don't bury me until all these people have met here, all of that sort of mysterious gothic horror movie thing trying to go on in the background. you hate this guy. The way that they talk about him, you hate him through them. Especially when you have when you have somebody like Dana who just has terrible things to say about him at dinner and stabs him through the heart while he's in his coffin just to make sure he's dead. So, you sort of feel bad for her, and then she is here. She's inherited this hotel, which, as we know from the beginning, has been around for a while and has some weird stuff going on with it. We know that, William Hickey has hidden his puppets in the walls of the hotel. So there's weird stuff going on. And she's lost her parents in this sort of mysterious way that we'll find out about later. And so she is sort of a tragic character. And so you can kind of understand why she's almost sort of in shock about things. But I almost feel like when they have their big reveal scene, and this is the kind of movie that tries to follow the formula that I really like in stories like this, where we have weird things going on and then we find little clues. I love when we find a diary in a movie. That's always fantastic. But, when we have her talking to him about this diary, I feel like that we should have led with that, Like, here's this stuff that I found, and my husband died mysteriously, and he spent all of his time in this walled off part of my parents' hotel. I feel like a lot of this stuff could have been divulged a little bit sooner on her part. But again, I can forgive it because she's grieving. And then we'll talk more about this when we get to the ending. We have our face off with our present day puppet master who is trying to wield the puppets. Although I'll talk about this later too. Although we learned if you're going to wield puppets, you got to respect the puppets. They have their showdown. Everybody's done, and Alex leaves, and then she's left there by herself, and now Dana's fake dog is alive. She's animated the dog. And so did she know this whole time? Did she only learn afterwards? Did she maybe try to animate her parents? I feel like that ending bit of her animating the dog would have made a much more interesting. It alludes to a much more interesting character than I think she really was. So, as heroes, they sort of fall into it. They just don't get killed. They find stuff and they don't get killed. And as a partnership slash love interest story, they sort of are just there because they sort of just fall into that as well because they just wind up being the only ones still left alive. So it doesn't feel like there's much for them to do. And like I said, unfortunately for Alex, we have a little bit more personality around the psychicness of our other psychics, but he's kind of personalityless about his abilities and even what he does as a living. There's not much to his story.
Totally fair. And I actually want to watch the sequel just out of curiosity, Zan, because when you and I reviewed Saw, you were like, obviously everything explained in the sequel. And I do want to sit down and watch Puppet Master 2 and just sort of see where the franchise went after this. And Rachel, what did you make of our final guy and our final gal?
Well, from what I understand, while you do get more world building and backstory, continuity doesn't mean crap. So you may be getting story, but they may be conflicting stories. There are 15 movies in this universe at the moment. It's ridiculous. Oh my goodness. Yeah, it's funny considering, like, again, I'm not the right age for this particular time period from when movies and stuff would have been coming out. So I don't have the foggiest idea who Paul Lamont is, but whatever to keep that SAG insurance going, I guess. We always joke on the Five-ish Fangirls because we talk about, we get a lot of British actors. And we always joke that if you're across the pond and you're an aspiring actor, you're going to cut your teeth on some combination of Shakespeare, Dickens, maybe Agatha Christie,
The Bill.
some Bronte or something like that. But here in the United States, when you're an aspiring actor, at least in front of a camera, you're gonna cut your teeth either on shitty horror flicks or daytime soap operas. And daytime soap operas are kind of going the way of the dodo. So really, you've got shitty horror movies and or action movies, which those are still being made even today. So all you up and coming actors out there, just be prepared. And this is very much like, the acting in this is terrible. It's god awful. And it's funny because like Paul Le Mat is supposed to be like our hero. Supposedly, in theory, I guess he was the actor with maybe the most name recognition at the time. It's like, oh, look, he's in movies and on Murder, She Wrote. Uh, and this guy has got like the personality of Raisin Bran. He has. We first see this dream. We were first introduced to him, and he's having this dream with the people dancing, and then the leeches. And it's like, okay, well, that gives us an idea of what his psychic power is like. Okay, good. But then he proceeds to have essentially the same dream. And then that turns out to be a dream in a dream. And when we're getting to he wakes up from the first dream and he's in the second dream and he's got the three heads of the other people in the bed. Shouldn't that have been a clue that maybe like, oh, they're dead? He never says anything about what these images in his dreams might mean. Like the only thing he mentions when he shows up and he's I think he's talking to Mrs. Gallagher, about their different abilities, and he's like, well, I had a dream and I'm here to make sure it doesn't come true. It's like, yeah, okay. He's just he's dull. He doesn't really do a whole lot except sleeping and or walking around. Like even when they come to like the big knockdown drag out fight between him and Gallagher after he big reveal, hey, I'm alive, kind of. He kind of gets his ass handed to him. It's the puppets turning on Gallagher that makes sure that his dream doesn't come true. So it's like, what? Like he's supposed to be like because he's the one other guy of their group that's not directly connected to somebody else in the group that makes him like the de facto lead. Is he the leader? Is he the Fred to the Scooby Gang? I don't know if he ends up appearing in any more. I'm not gonna watch any more of them. I don't care enough to find out. But because he is one of the people at the end that's still alive, it's like it kind of seems like it's setting up for him to maybe come back and be the hero again. Very Halloween-esque. But I wouldn't want him to come back because he's so boring. At least Megan has some personality, but she at the moment she's grieving. She's a grieving widow. They haven't been married very long, so it can't be like, oh, we were married for so many years. Like they were married like 2 years. She seems like Zan's right. They like it's once we get to the reveal of like, oh yeah, I found this up in the attic where my husband would spend all of his time. All the backstory that she finally gives, about the hotel and them renovating it and all of this stuff, and it's like, okay, obviously way more than you're letting on. Why? It's like, are you complicit in this or are you just clueless? And again, by the end, she survives. It's her and the hotel and the revived dog, and it's like, okay, How is again? Are we setting up for her to come back later? Important, maybe. I don't. But I don't care enough to stick around to watch more to see if that's the case. Like both of these characters, it's like, yay, we have some survivors, but it's like you're not necessarily cheering for them like you would like Laurie Strode or any other final girl, final living character. And because they really didn't do anything. They didn't really fight back. It's not like they fought tooth and nail for their survival or somebody, or their friend's survival. They just got really, really lucky that the person they were up against is a real dickhead and essentially had his minions turn on him so that they were no longer the target. And it's like if you are gonna do a movie like this with maybe the idea that there could be more, either because you're hoping it's successful or you're just gonna try to cash in on the people like crappy, scary horror movies, and they're because we're not putting in movie theaters, we can put it on VHS and the home VCR, and everything is a hot thing by this time. So they're getting in on a market that's very, very hot, with people having VCRs at home and video rentals being a thing. So it's like, even if you're like, well, maybe we might break even, maybe make enough money to make the next one, shouldn't you want your characters that survive and possibly are going to come back be characters that your viewers are going to care about? Like like I said, I don't really want to watch any more of them, but honestly, I was kind of more concerned about what happens to some of the puppets than these two at the end.
And Keith and I had a long discussion about the puppets and such, and of course we will talk about them naturally. And it is interesting, when it comes to this particular epoch where VCR was a very hot commodity, and the big things were porn and horror. So and we do get a little bit of, I guess, the mixture here of sex and violence in this as well, because 80s horror, you are going to have female frontal nudity, which is obviously what you would often have. Consider that what you will. But when it comes to these two characters, I think they definitely feel, I agree with you guys, I think they feel less like traditional protagonists and more like lenses through which the film's mood comes into focus. Because yes, Alex does carry that kind of quiet detachment. There is an introspective quality there, like someone already half removed from the situation before things even begin to unravel. And that distance makes the descent into the film's strange reality, at least to me, feel more natural. It's not a sharp break, but a gradual slide. The performance leans into subtlety rather than intensity, which fits, I think, the film's restrained tone, though it can also make the character feel a bit muted at times. Whereas Megan, on the other hand, brings, I think, a slightly warmer, more grounded presence. There is an emotional openness that contrasts with Alex's detachment, giving the story a bit of human weight. She feels, I think, more reactive, more connected to what's happening, which helps anchor some of the film's more surreal elements. Still, like much of the cast, she is working within a script that doesn't dig deeply into character. So a lot of what comes through relies on tone rather than development. Neither role is especially complex on paper, but together I think they create a balance. One leans inward, the other outward. And that dynamic helps carry the film through its quieter stretches. And in a movie where atmosphere matters more than character arcs, they do enough to keep things cohesive without pulling focus away from the central unsettling idea. So I enjoyed them, and I actually wanted to look up Robin Freites and see what else she did aside from this. So let's get to the rest of our psychic troupe. We have Irene Miracle as Dana Hadley, Matt Rowe as Frank Forrester, and Catherine O'Reilly as Carissa Stamford. So Zan, starting with you, I will admit every time that Dana opened her mouth, I thought of you doing your great impersonation of a Southern accent. So what did you make of these three?
My basic generic can't tell what state it is Southern accent.
Yes.
Um, these three also made me just wonder, why are they a threat? You know, I can't quite figure out why any of these people needed to die. I mean, there's aside from being the psychic ones that could possibly figure out the, you know, Neil's plan, um, and the fact that he's just a dick. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. um, Dana, I like Dana, just because she's such a beautiful trope of the typical thing that we think of when we think of like a fortune teller, you know, just a great trope of that, except there's a cynicism to her because unlike also quick shout out to Barbara Crampton's cameo in this at the carnival, getting her fortune told with Dana. Reanimator fans out there probably enjoyed that. Um, so you know, she's a great trope for that, but like I said, there's a cynicism to her, I think, because of the fact that this is real and this is not easy. You know, when she has a premonition of herself getting her throat slit, that can't be easy. It can't be easy to live with this fear. You know, she may not be able to tell you whose grandmother it really is because she's trying to make money, but there's something about this that is real. She's very, you know, Whoopi Goldberg and Ghost, you know. You know, we got to make some money, so we're going to say what we got to say when we have to say it, but when it's real, it is real. And you know, the cynicism of that. And but again, there are just things that we don't quite explain. They're there for a reason, but we don't explain them. Like, why is she carrying around her taxidermy dog? Like, who tell me more about this dog. And what was it, a childhood dog? Was it, you know, there's just you know, there's the quirkiness, I think, is interesting with this character, but again, we don't give a lot of backstory to everybody. We get a little more backstories to who everybody is with our other psychics, but you know, Dana might as well be Priscilla Barnes working as a topless psychic at the dirt mall. I mean, it's just and again, when you have these movies where people, you know, sort of come together with their different clairvoyant powers, there's always something quirky about it. But um I I liked her, and I think her death in particular made me realize that this movie is too well lit because it's very bright. And granted, puppets coming to life and killing you is very, very creepy. But at the same time, I feel like if I could see the puppet, I could probably kick it and maybe stomp on it, you know? And then even when we were watching it, Chris was like, "It's a puppet." I'm like, "Well, he did break her leg. I mean, there is that." So, but yeah, again, not 100% sure why everybody has to die in this one. And frankly, the less said about our sex psychics, the better. This couple was so ridiculous with, you know, him with his dork knob and her with her, you know, masturbatorial sighing every time she has a vision. Just, you know, let's add sex to our movie, but let's make it part of the plot. And then even when I was watching this, I'm like, if you're gonna have a sex scene where somebody is legit sitting on top of someone who has a sheet over their genitals, don't show us the sheet, okay? Don't show us that there's no possible way that they could actually be having sex in this scene. It was just kind of ridiculous. And the fact that they seemed to be the most on the up and up when it came to using their powers as their profession. You know, they have an institute and a lab and everything, and they have they're doing research and all of that. And it's like, who needs to get a doctor referral to a sex psychic? It just was bizarre to me, that concept. And again, not sure why they needed to die for this, especially since it seems like their psychic proclivities are a very different brand of what Neil is trying to keep all to himself. But yeah, just sort of, you know, and they did eventually get to the point where, yeah, they're sex psychics, and they're also just really way into that. Like they're their kink is voyeurism by way of psychic energy. So it was just sort of like, oh my God, do I have to watch this really bad sex scene? or or her in the bathtub? Do I have to keep doing that? And again, Chris made a comment when the leech puppet, the leech woman puppet is kind of licking his nipples. He's like, so there's no way he can tell that that's a puppet? Like that's not a person? So, I mean, it was kind of a bizarre puppet kink way to die, but it was like, really, he doesn't. I know he's blindfolded, but come on, that can't feel like a person, right? So yeah, these were kind of ridiculous tropes. Who I still can't figure out why they needed to die, but they helped our movie become feature length. So
I will say that I did like Carissa's kimono or whatever you want to call that she was wearing. It was very nice. That aside, being from Milan, we do like well-dressed women, even when it comes to the bedroom.
Yeah, she looked lovely, but he needs to take the sheet off if they're going to actually do anything.
Very well said, Zach. That is very true. It's like nothing's going on here. And Rachel, what did you make of the rest of our psychic troupe?
Yeah, quite the ragtag group they've got going there. Dana, to me, when she was talking and when her like southern accent was really shining through, I was like, when did you escape the set of Designing Women? Because that's what she sounds like. She could have easily been a sugar baker. But of the kind of the group, her powers seem to be like the most like legit and useful. Yeah, seeing your own death is a bit disturbing, especially because you don't know if that's necessarily something that's set in stone. You don't know how when in the future that situation may occur. So she's kind of got that hanging over her. But as far as like her ability to do like charms and spells and stuff seems to work to a point. She's able to put some enchantments and stuff on around her hotel room and some other places. So I gotta give her that. Obviously the stuff that she's actually good at is not stuff that she can do at like a carnival and get somebody to pay her like 10-20 bucks and be like, tell me my future. So it's like she's one of those people. It's like she does have powers, it just doesn't work the way that paying customers want them to work. She definitely has no filter whatsoever. She has got opinions and she is going to state them out loud. Again, I feel like she just stumbled, she auditioned for Designing Women and didn't get the gig, and the character that she used at that audition she just stuck with and got this gig instead. But considering how little like backstory or kind of explanations we get from a lot of these characters, the fact that she has no filter gives us an opportunity to have someone actually tell us something, even if it is based on her opinion. At least we're still getting some information. So we've got that going for us. The whole dog thing, you know what? As a person who now has a dog, and even before I got said dog, I was well aware that I am going to be getting something that I am going to outlive, which makes me sad. But at the moment, I'm very, very happy. So we're going to focus on the present and not the future. But yeah, I mean, there is something about a beloved pet that once they pass, that in her case, because she's a witch, maybe he's like a totem of some sort for her. It also seems to be like, the only, set of ears that she has around on a consistent basis that will listen to her. That it seems like her unfiltered mouth probably gets her in trouble sometimes and probably tends to keep people at arm's length. Even these guys who she's known for a very long time, and they seem to be they were a close group at one point. They're even like, she says some things that's like, keep your mouth shut, you know. So I think the dog is somewhat of a comfort thing for her because she does not have a lot, you know, friends, family, but also as a witch, it may be like some sort of like talisman or token, you know, or totem for her that just never got explained like a lot of things in this movie. And then our sex maniacs, again, a lot of 70s and 80s and even going into some of the 90s horror films, sex, TNA, it's a necessity as much as we don't like, you know, because, yeah, I have no problem with sex in media. I have no problem showing body parts, naked body parts in media, as long as it's done, as long as the people involved weren't being exploited. So if these people had no problem with it, then fine. You know, it's in this case, they found a way to be able to get some sex, some very loud sex, and make it part of the plot, very loosely part of the plot. And her getting out of the bathtub, yes, we get a little flash of some little titty. So you know, everybody wins. I guess. But yeah, like what was their point? Like her thing is like the more aroused she is, the more in tune she can get with the spirit world or something. Again, things are not explained very well in this. You know, I mean, you're talking about abilities that, as far as we know, don't exist in reality, that we're aware of. So, how do you explain something that was completely made up? Well, make up the explanation. You're like, it is. This isn't an Andy Weir novel. This isn't The Martian or, you know, Project Hail Mary. It doesn't have to be based on actual science. Um, and so it's like, I really just think that they just saw this as an opportunity to be able to get some TNA and some sex into a horror film because that's part of the recipe. But I mean, their deaths are, first of all, you don't even see her death. All you see is, which up into this, as far as I can remember, up until this point, Tunneler is not one we'd seen before, but until he showed up under the bed. And then you can just kind of guess at what he's doing, you know, obviously generating a lot of blood, but you don't really know exactly what he did to kill her. I guess, you know, drilling enough holes into her until she bleeds to death, I guess, would be sufficient, but not very exciting. And then his death by leeches, which, you know, the puppet, Miss Leech, Leech woman, like she's a cute little puppet. I think that's probably part of it. Is, you know, she's cute. She's not odd looking like some of the others. You know, there doesn't seem to be something. Just looking at her, she doesn't seem especially dangerous until she starts spinning up the leeches. Which, I mean, how many? I mean, it's been a long time since bloodletting was a thing, but how many leeches does it take for you to die by blood loss? Because, I mean, yes, he was tied up, so he couldn't really go anywhere, but at the same time, it's like, how many leeches did she spit up? Yeah. Do I want an actual answer to that? No, not really. Honestly, I found the leeches probably one of the more disgusting parts of the movie just because I can't. I can do blood, I can do guts for the most part. I can't do stuff coming up and out of the mouth, like vomit and other things. And I can't stand going near the eyeballs. Stay away from the face, pretty much. So she's the one puppet where it's like, oh well, now that I know what you do, I'm going to stay far away, thank you. But yeah, it's again, it's they knew the formula at this point. I mean, it's 1989. We've got dozens, if not hundreds, of horror films out there in the zeitgeist at this point, and everybody knows what the formula is, and they're checking off boxes at this point. And this is an opportunity to have like, oh, she's psychic, but she's more of like a witch type psychic, so you can have kind of that more supernatural type thing to it. Then we've got these two people who specialize in sex, so we can get our sex and our boob shots in the movie, and it's just like, okay, fine.
Welcome to the late 80s, I suppose, and early 90s, indeed. And but yes, it is a good point. And funnily enough, we'll talk about the puppets here shortly. But apparently, Leech Woman was actually voiced by a very popular soap opera actress. Funny enough, and all she does is kind of moan and groan. But I guess she wanted to do this film. And Keith, coming to you, what did you make of our three other psychics?
I mean, they're the most waste of space you could actually have in characters. They were there just to pad the story, as they've already been mentioned numerous times at this point. They're we get to see some of their psychic powers, but it doesn't apply to anything related to the story. Like, oh boy, you have sex psychics and a really shitty fortune teller. Okay. Like, does that help anything? No. Does that apply to anything that's going on in the story? Nope. They just have really weird powers and abilities. And my whole thing is, being an adult now and rewatching this and actually analyzing the movie, you have this clinic where they're using these psychic powers. I just want to know the pitch for this clinic, because they had to get funding. All right, they went in front of the school board. All right, hear us out. We're psychics. All right, fine, whatever. Yeah, but we're really specific psychics. Okay. And what kind of psychics are you? We're sex psychics. I'm sorry, what now? Yeah, we only care about sex because everything else is just pointless, apparently. And which is really silly, because based on her psychic abilities, you would think they would come in handy, as he kind of gave their backstories, oh, she can touch stuff and, feel things and understand things and see things. Okay, cool, that's going to apply, right? Nope. She's going to have a little murder orgy going on here and get killed by Tunneler, which is the silliest out of all of them to possibly die. She was the one that you think could have gotten away, because she looks under the bed and goes, oh, look, there's this little gremlin looking thing with a drill on his head flying at me. Let me just move. Nope. She stands there and takes it like a champ in the face. And it's okay. Why did you just not, I don't know, stand up, move out of the way, put your hands up, literally any number of things. And then meanwhile, you have Douche Nozzle with his little douche knob in the back, where he's there for the sex. And as been mentioned, he has this weird fetish / kink about documenting his sexcapades. And I feel bad for the assistant that has to transcribe this crap, because somebody has to listen to all this. And the fact that he's okay, transcriber, put a little note in here, fuck. How much do they get paid? Clearly not enough. Are they just doing it for credits because they need to graduate in the fall? They're yeah, I'm doing this thing for one of the professors. Oh yeah, what are you doing? Transcribing. Oh, it's not that bad. Yeah, let me tell you which professor it's for. Oh, never mind. And it just that's a whole other movie in itself, is just that silly shenanigans. And it kind of reminded me of Peter and the guys from Ghostbusters doing their little psychic shenanigans at university. I feel like that's kind of loosely where they were inspired by these two characters. But again, you don't need them. With them, without them, the movie still ends the same way. Dude gets beat up, little action figures kill a guy, and they just live happily ever after. And that's the end. So these two were just complete fluff and filler. The three of them are the episode in a season where they just don't know what to do with themselves, and they're like, we'll just throw something in here and see what sticks, and maybe nobody will care. Because you expect to see these characters like the witch, and maybe she's going to explain something. She's going to have a vision. Yes, she does bless her room, but still gets attacked anyway by Pinhead, and then killed by what's his face? So it's like the fact that she's kind of psychic, but not effectively psychic is kind of funny. And then again, she has her weird emotional support stuffed animal that she brings around with her everywhere that literally does nothing, just there to look pretty. And then she has somebody to talk to and vent about, and then eventually comes back to life. But at no relevant point that we actually, could use this murder dog like Cujo or something. It's just, okay, thanks. See you next time. And just to spoil this for everybody on our little podcast, no, they don't ever come back.
Well, appreciate that, Keith, because like I said, I mean, I will watch the sequel regardless and see how things go. But appreciate that, and I have to learn not to drink while you are talking because I always end up splitting my sides laughing. But as always, great stuff for sure. When it comes to these two characters, yeah, they do feel like different facets of the same idea rather than fully independent personalities, because they are there to create contrast and tension and a bit of unpredictability within a very contained story. I mean, Dana has a more measured presence. There is a sense of restraint, like she's observing as much as reacting. And that gives her, I think, a slightly stabilizing role in the group, even when things start to slip out of control. She doesn't dominate the screen, but she does help maintain a kind of emotional baseline. Frank brings a heavier energy. There is frustration and ego underneath the surface, which adds friction to the group dynamic. He feels more volatile, more likely to push against others rather than move with them. And that tension, I think, becomes useful for the film, especially since so much of it relies on interpersonal unease rather than overt action. And Carissa, I think, leans more into vulnerability, but not in a passive way. There is a sensitivity there that makes the situation feel more immediate and personal. She reacts in a way that highlights the strangeness of what's happening, almost like she's the one most attuned to how wrong it all is. None of them are deeply explored, and that's consistent with the film's priorities. The story isn't really about who they are individually, but about how they respond to a shared, unsettling environment. I think together they create a shifting balance of calm, conflict, and fear that helps sustain the film's slow creeping tension. So, getting to our puppets, I will name them because if not, they will come after me. We do, of course, have Blade, Jester, Pinhead, Tunneler, Leech Woman, Shredder Khan, and Gengi. So, Rachel, starting with you, what did you make of the puppets?
Now, see, this is where kind of the whole similarity to the Saw thing comes into play, because we don't we get our little kind of preamble with Saloon, and we see him creating Jester, and we see him as he finishes up Jester and brings them to life, and then he's starting to put them in the trunk to hide them, and we see a little bit of movement and get an idea of maybe what their personality is. And Blade seems to be kind of the leader, the top puppet, firstborn maybe, I don't know. I know he's the one of the few puppets that appears in every single movie and also appears on the cover of every single movie. But it's like we learn later in the movie that there was a supposed, through the diary, that there was some ancient Egyptian ritual or spell or something that you could animate something that's not alive, and give it the ability to move and think, I guess, and have free movement, free will, I guess, maybe to a point. But it's like, why was he making them in the first place? Yes, the Nazi thing, you can tie that together if you're aware of the Nazi and specifically Hitler's fascination with the cult. We learned about that also in Indiana Jones, but I don't know if that's necessarily something that's well known. I don't think that's something that really gets touched upon when you teach World War II in like high school history, uh, history class. Um, so yeah, it's yeah, because it at least in this one, because it's the first one, it is 1930 something. So Hitler's still alive and the Nazis are doing their thing. So yes, I could see him when he's aware that the Nazis are coming, so he's going to hide them because I guess he thinks they could be potential weapons, and or if Hitler figured out how to do the ritual, then he could make his own army of zombies or whatever. So he hides them and then he kills himself, so the knowledge that he has, at least in his head, dies with him. Okay, that's easily enough. But in the 50-ish years from him killing himself and these people coming to the hotel, Gallagher at some point figured out this was the hotel he was staying at. So he gets close to the owners and the owner's daughter. We'll talk about more of that when we talk about Gallagher. Presumably he finds the puppets, finds the diary and all the other papers and stuff, and figures out how to do the ritual. And he would start with the puppets. So he brings the puppets back to life because presumably their life ends when their masters ends. So I guess technically they were dead or like in a coma or something until somebody came back to revive them. But there's not really an explanation of like they seemed fairly harmless when Tulum was the person who brought them to life, but now Gallagher's got them, and that's why they're all creepy little murderers. Like, is it the person who revives them and their like soul and personality? Is that give them their personalities and make them dangerous or not dangerous? But then I'm aware of in the sequels, there's some idea about they also might be possessed by different souls, like a Chucky type thing. Again, continuity, not a thing in this series, in this universe. But it's like, why did to make puppets that some of them why did he make them that they had like murder implements as part of their build in the first place? Like, I have questions that are not yet, but I don't want to watch any of the sequels to get answers. Um, but I mean, the designs are kind of fun. Um, for what they are, they needed to be not overly complicated. Blade is the most complicated. He takes 5 puppeteers to maneuver. But their look is a good indicator of kind of why they are dangerous. Some are more, like I said, some are more obvious than others. Blade's got Blade and the Hook. Tunneler. Pinhead packs a wallop of a punch. And then you got Leech Woman who looks innocuous, and then she opens her mouth and things change. We don't really get to see what the others are capable of, what exactly their murderous potential abilities are, but they're definitely unique. I'm glad that they each have a unique look, and it's distinct, so you can tell them apart. Which, as you go on in the franchise, you learn what their abilities are, so that when you see them, you're like, ha ha, somebody's getting sliced up, or ha ha, somebody's getting drilled into. Yeah, that sort of thing. And I know there's even crazier puppets down the line. There's one that looks like a cowboy. It's got 6 arms and can shoot 6 guns at the same time. So yeah, kudos to the designers for coming up with very unique and distinct looking characters, so that they're each unique character. And something that, for lack of continuity everywhere else, they do give some semblance of a through line through the entire universe.
Exactly. Kudos to the real puppeteers or puppet masters in this film for sure. And Keith, you and I talked a little bit about, I tried to share my theories on what was behind the puppets and stuff, and you did your best not to spoil it for me. But yeah, what did you make of our puppets in this first film of the franchise?
Well, this is one of those, as you guys mentioned, like Saw, where you're already jumped in, or jumping in rather, halfway through the story. So you have to either try to figure it out by context clues or hope somebody explains something at some point, i.e., the diary or a flashback or something else. But they seem to have made the movie first, then went, shit, we need to explain everything. And if you do watch the rest of the movies in the franchise, in several instances, they do explain more. Like in Puppet Master 3, they really kind of go into the details as to why Leech is Leech and how that happened and all the craziness of some of these origins of these characters. Because again, it's World War II and they're fighting Nazis. So the reason why you have, Spiral and all the characters with how they're designed is because they were essentially revenge toys. He was building these partially in order to defend himself and partially because of what had happened to the souls of these puppets. So you do eventually get there, but it does take a lot of time. And this one was just more of the blood, guts, and gore. And Nick, as you and I had mentioned off air the other day, it's amazing how nobody ever sees these stupid puppets running around. It's not like they're like a couple inches tall. These little suckers are like, I don't know, a foot and a half, 2 feet tall. In Six Arms cases, I think he's almost close to like 2.5, 3 feet tall because he's a giant of a dude. But again, nobody ever sees this stuff, and they just go running around all willy nilly. Blade literally ran through an entire hotel and knocked over some shit and ran into a chair. Nobody noticed. And then
Hey, nobody notices the toys running around in Toy Story either. So,
well, that's a different story. But
I'm just saying, can be very oblivious.
Yeah, but in Toy Story, they at least make a conscious effort to not be seen. Blade is just like hauling booty around the hotel, and you hear him like panting like heavily. So it's not like he's a ninja or something like that. He's whack, and like the entire time, like I'm sorry if I'm standing in a hallway and I hear grunts and stuff, I'm gonna turn around and be like, what in the happy heck is going on? And we do see that one time with the old lady, and she probably died from a massive coronary, seeing a little demon monster running around with knives for hands. But I do appreciate some of the characters, like Jester. I've always liked Jester because of his spinning faces and he changes his expressions, which is funny because it's not like he has 12 faces. He just has these three little joints and he spins them around. He's either happy, sad, angry, shocked, concerned, whatever the case may be. But the level of effort they went into the details of some of these puppets is just wild. I mean, granted, Pinhead is probably the laziest of all of them because just a dude in a sweater with a little knobby head. But again, they did it for fun. And then there's some other ones that they didn't introduce in this one that we see in some later iterations that are even crazier. So I will give the special effects team credit where credit is due. They were on point, even with the stop motion animation we got with some of the characters. The fact again that you saw Jester spinning his head on camera in front of the other actors is just a testament to how well they can do things with a limited budget, considering this was the 80s.
Yes, indeed. I mean, as I said, this movie cost literally $1 million to make. And so, compared to to the budgets of other films, which are probably, even lesser quality but cost more to make. I mean, more power to, as I said, the practical effects team for sure, Keith. And Zan, what did you make of our puppets?
Like I said before, these puppets are very endearing. They're kind of why we're here. And like Keith and Rachel have both said, they kind of don't really make any sense. Again, I talked about this when we talked about Saw. If your movie needs subsequent movies to make your movie make sense, that's a little bit of an issue for me. It is fun for fans of a franchise to watch things unravel. But again, we have this beginning sequence of a man who has the ability to animate puppets being chased by Nazis, committing suicide so the Nazis don't find him or his puppets. But we have no idea, did he make the puppets to animate them? Did he have the puppets and then found out about this Egyptian curse or this Egyptian spell? How did William Hickey, Dr. Finkelstein from Nightmare Before Christmas, by the way, how did was he an Egyptologist? Like, how did he find this out? If it is an ancient Egyptian curse / spell, can't the Nazis just find that in Egypt wherever he found it? Same thing with Neil. I mean, Neil's killing everybody to keep them from learning his secret. But the Egyptians had the secret. You know, I love that it's that everybody is looking for Toulon's diary. Go look in Egypt. Is it just because we're cheap and we want to go to this hotel? I mean, I'll talk more about Neil being cheap in a minute, but why? How is this guy in possession of these Egyptian secrets? I think that's a fascinating concept that we never even touch in this movie, really. You know, why did he make them evil? You know, he's sort of like the JF Sebastian of this movie. Like, is he making friends, but making them like also protectors as well? And, you know, why do they? I don't know. But anyway, the puppets themselves are incredibly endearing. It is pretty decent puppetry work for the budget they have and what they have to work with. Again, I would really love to see a movie that is just Hellraiser with puppets. And I say that not just because of one is called Pinhead and not just because one is sort of sexually motivated, but they do just sort of come from nowhere when you least expect it and either do someone's bidding or take the necessary revenge. I feel like Pinhead is sitting around going like, really? No one's going to talk about how giant my hands are? We're just going to focus on the head? All right, I guess that's how everybody is. But they're cool looking. They're cool looking puppets. I like Jester as well. I like how smooth his movements are. Blade is very cool. Blade is, such a creepy looking, almost it's that old man from the later Poltergeist movies. He kind of looks like a puppet version of that guy. I can't think of that guy's name. And like I said, Leech Woman, she reminds me a little bit of the dolls in Barbarella, where they look cute and then something horrible happens. And when I watched this movie, I was like, oh yeah, she's like kind of like a hidden monster, like the Kyle MacLachlan Hidden movie with weird crap coming out of your mouth. Tunneler makes me wonder how. Like Rachel said, I mean, if their puppet master goes, they go too, I suppose. But if they had powers, how were they locked up all those years of tunnelers in there? That doesn't make any sense. You'd think there'd be huge holes in this hotel from them getting wherever they were trying to be locked out of from. So, and I also, like I said, the main thing I wonder is what do the Nazis want? Do they want these puppets? Do they want to wield these puppets in particular? Or do they want to wield the power? I don't really know. And honestly, I wouldn't put either one past Hitler. He was crazy. He didn't make any damn sense. Maybe he did want killer puppets. He's like, whatever. I don't care if it's an Egyptian curse. It'll reanimate literally anything. I just want that puppet with the knives and the one that'll punch people out. So, but yeah, they're creative and very endearing. They're why you're watching this.
They very much are so. And I think, especially Blade, very, very iconic when it comes to his look. But yes, the real presence in this film isn't human at all. It is the puppets, and the film understands that, I think, from the start. And what I think makes them work is how deliberately they're introduced. There's no rush to explain or overexpose them. Instead, you get glimpses and movements and small actions that feel purposeful. They aren't chaotic forces. They operate with intention, almost like they're following rules you're not fully allowed to see. And that restraint, I think, gives them weight. Each one does have a distinct identity, not through dialogue, but through design and behavior, the shapes, the way they move, the tools they carry, all suggest personality without ever stating it outright. It's simple, I think, but effective. You immediately understand that they're not interchangeable, they do have roles. And there is also something unsettling about their scale. They're small, easy to overlook, which flips the usual sense of threat. Danger doesn't come from something overwhelming. It comes from something you might not notice until it's already close. And that inversion is where a lot of the film's tension lives. At the same time, I agree, Zan, there is a strange charm to them. You can feel the craftsmanship, the practical effects, the physicality of how they were made. It gives them, as I was mentioning earlier, a tactile presence that holds up better than something more polished might have. They feel real in a very specific handmade way. What I think lingers is that balance between control and autonomy, because they move like they're guided, but also like they have their own intent. And the film never fully settles that question. And I think it's better for it. It leaves you with the sense that these small figures exist somewhere between object and will. And that uncertainty is exactly what makes them stick. Not to mention, of course, the great designs as well. So let's get to our main villain. We have Jimmy F. Skaggs, no relation to our good friend Charles Skaggs, I don't think, as Neil Gallagher. So Keith, starting with you, what did you make of Neil?
I mean, the dude's pretty cut and dry. Like, he just wants to rule the world. Like, he is very on brand from everything you hear about with the other psychics in the group, that he's just a piece of crap, a horrible human being. And you know what? He lives up to it. He is legitimately a piece of crap and a horrible human being. That all being said, the dude just had to either outlive the trio or send the puppets to kill said trio, and none of this would have been a thing. The fact that he alludes to them possibly, maybe, who knows, at some point figuring out that he has found the elixir of immortality potentially. And again, two of them are just sex addicts, so they'll never figure it out. And the other dude just has nightmares, and he can't read his nightmares to save his life. So the most part, he is safe. He literally just had to ride this out to the end, or again, send the trio of puppets to do his bidding. Because up until he starts slapping his ex-wife, wife, whatever, around and really abusing everybody, that they do his bidding. And generally, as a rule, it's sort of like in a lot of manga and anime, they have to accept you as their master, and then they'll do your bidding. But they're not tied to you, at least not as the creators. So once they go, nope, you're a piece of shit, and they turn on him, they literally beat him up in 2.5 seconds. He just had to focus that energy on these three psychics, and then dude could have just lived his days out in the hotel, and nobody would have known. Guy could have taken over the world with, 2-3 foot tall puppets or whatever the case may be, and or potentially animate a whole army to take over the world. But Dum Dum here is like, oh, you guys might have maybe kind of sort of figured this out at some point. Well, one of you would have. The other two are too busy boinging, so I don't have to worry about them. They're going to die from an STD. You, on the other hand, are just this narcoleptic, middle-aged, I don't know, Indiana Jones knockoff. And again, could have just rode this whole thing out. He could have found the books and the dolls and the secret formula, which again, we don't see any of that because it all happened all off screen. Like Squirrel Girl defeating Galactus. It's a thing, it happened, but we'll never see it. And the fact is, he could have just done all this very low key, still been a piece of crap like he is, but they all would have just died mysterious deaths, and nobody would have been the wiser, because again, two of them are practically useless, and the third one is just having weird leech dreams. So, I mean, it's fine. The thing is, with this actor, he only plays, at the time, this type of character. So you see him on screen, you're like, okay, he's the bad guy. You know some crazy stuff's going to happen. And I will give them credit where credit is due. They don't wait very long. He gets up, he starts sitting in chairs, he's moving around, he's really creeping the group out, and he really leans into it. And again, he sends his puppets to slowly pick each one of them off. and it's only by chance that the narcoleptic psychic survives, and it's because he beat his wife. So I will give him the puppets credit. They do have morals. They will, stand up when they have to, but for the most part, yes, they will kill anybody he orders them to until that point. So I just think it was a waste of a supervillain. He could have literally lived forever and nobody would have known that was him. You just have to change his name every, dozen years or so because it'd look a little weird that this guy keeps popping up.
Very much so. Yes, I think it was just maybe a question of changing one's alias, I guess, to continue his life. And Zan, what did you make of our villain?
I mean, okay, I get where he's going with this. That if he commits suicide, he becomes an inanimate object. If he then reanimates himself, he's then immortal because of that. So he kind of needs the puppets to reanimate him. It's a very convoluted plan, frankly. He's a terrible person, ingratiating himself to the daughter of the people he's murdering. Just go to the hotel. This looks like one of those hotels like Faulty Towers where somebody like the major just is there all the time. And if nobody's noticing these puppets running around, I don't think anybody's going to notice this guy going into another room to steal a diary and find some puppets in the wall. I don't think that he had to kill the owners to get to the stuff in the hotel. He doesn't even particularly care about the hotel. He just wants the stuff in it. And again, this is a very convoluted plan when this is an Egyptian curse. Like, how can William Hickey be the only guy that knows this Egyptian curse that he has to murder people to get to their hotel and find this? Also, how did he find out about it? I don't know. Is that the whole because he's psychic thing? And that's just what we're going with? Like, they're psychic, like on The Simpsons, when they're talking about something weird happening on Xena, a wizard did it. I don't understand why, how he found this out. You would think that if you wanted to be immortal, you would be studying Egyptian lore because they did have a lot of they did have a lot of belief in immortality and life after death and all that stuff. But then why would you go to Bodega Bay to William Hickey? It's so, it's so white appropriating what he's doing here. So yeah, Neil is just kind of going to bed. It's like Gonzo saying he wants to go to Bombay, India to make it into motion pictures. It's like he wants to be in English speaking pictures. It's like, no, that's when you go to Bollywood. That's not, it's like, that's not what you do. You go to Hollywood, where we're going. Yeah, if you want to do it the easy way. It's like, if you want to do it the easy way, study Egyptology. If you want to do it the hard way, go to Bodega Bay, marry somebody you hate, kill her parents, and inherit the hotel, and then just go in one of the rooms and find the stuff. So he just kind of doesn't really make any sense. Also, how is he reanimated? Like, what is it animating? Like, if it can animate inanimate tissue, how is it animating organic tissue? And does he still need his heart? Because Dana did stab him through the heart. So I am made of questions when it comes to Neil, but ultimately I hated him, which is why I kind of love the ending of this movie.
I think a lot of us very much enjoyed the end of this movie indeed when it comes to the fate of Mr. Gallagher. Speaking of which, Rachel, what did you make of our villain?
Yeah, I mean, as far as villains go, this guy's an idiot. Like, Dan's absolutely right. Like, it's like the master in Doctor Who has to come up with all this weird, elaborate plan that ultimately is going to get foiled, and then the people or creatures or whatever that he convinced to work alongside of him are going to turn on him. Obviously, this guy's never watched classic Doctor Who. Yeah, there's so many of the questions revolve around this guy. Again, it feels like they had several ideas for different movies and couldn't flush them out, so they just threw them all in a pot and called it a casserole or something. That's a Midwestern thing for all. It's like, yeah, all other than just wanting to shake my head going, you're just the biggest idiot I've seen in a horror movie in I don't know how long. And you're supposed to be our antagonist? Our villain? I don't get it. I have so many questions that part of me really wants answers to, but knows that I'm not going to get it because that's not how this franchise works.
That is fair, because I personally, that's why I'm going to be watching a couple more just to kind of see how it goes. But just for the heck of it. But yes, Neil does feel less like a traditional presence and more like a shadow that hangs over everything. Even when not directly on screen, there is a sense that everything traces back to him. The film builds this quiet gravity around his absence, which ends up being more effective than constant exposure would have been. I think it gives him a kind of mythic weight. You're not just watching events unfold, you're feeling the after effects of something already set in motion. What I think is interesting is how he represents control taken to an extreme. Not just influence, but creation and manipulation pushed beyond normal limits. There is an ambiguity there as well. Is this about mastery, obsession, or something closer to surrendering control to the very thing he shaped? The film never fully answers that, and that uncertainty, I think, makes him more compelling. He also ties the whole story together thematically. While the others react or struggle or try to understand, he exists as the origin point, the one who blurred the line first. And that gives the film a kind of quiet cohesion. Everything strange, everything unsettling, feels like an extension of his choices. And in the end, he's not defined by screen time, but by impact. And the story moves because of him, and the unease lingers because whatever he started doesn't feel contained or finished. But Rachel, I think you make a great point comparing him to the Master, because it is a very, very apt comparison indeed. So getting to how this movie ended, of course, after all the great shenanigans and Neo is killed by the puppets, the next day, Megan sees Alex off, and Dana's laxidermized dog Leroy begins to walk on its own, revealing that, gasp, Megan has reanimated it, and we cut to credits. So Zan, what did you make of how Puppet Master ended?
Like I said, you got to respect the puppets. If you're going to reanimate puppets and have them do your bidding, you can't make fun of them. You can't insult them. This was a comeuppance story via puppets, and I was there for it. I absolutely loved it because, like I said, that's kind of what I wanted to see in this movie. I kind of wanted to see Hellraiser with puppets, where they all just come at you, like how they come at her uncle in Hellraiser. So yeah, that was fantastic, and and just how he has the blood of the undead, and he's just not right, and I feel like the actor who played this did a great job of looking just not quite right. Like he didn't quite pass, the Turing test when it came to being a human being. So I loved that the puppets exacted their revenge. But then at the same time, I'm sort of like, but what is the puppets? What is their motivation? If they're just being animated for somebody's bidding, like what's their next bidding? It's like, again, I'm bringing back The Simpsons. When the Simpsons free the golem, what is he going to do? What's his plan? He's been in the revenge business so long, he doesn't know what to do now. So that does leave it open-ended, and you do kind of want to say like, hey, I'd watch more of these puppets maybe if there was another movie. And then again, we have the ending where we see Megan has animated the dog. So now we're wondering, what are the rules? What are the rules of this animation? Because they really don't tell us much about the actual spell. I think that was a little more than they wanted to write at that point. And so is the dog going to be evil? Like, is she going to be evil? Spoiler alert, she doesn't make it between the first and second movies. So, and we don't really ever find out what happened to the dog. At least I don't think we do. So what's the deal with that? So while I enjoy the comeuppance ending of this movie, I don't particularly enjoy the fact that it opened more worms that would have been possibly a much more entertaining movie.
Very well said. And yes, the Hellraiser situation is very real with this when, of course, the Cenobites come after Frank. And here, of course, when they come after
You
Neil.
insulted the puppets. We came.
Exactly. And all hail the Cenobites. Of course, definitely want to show my respect. I won't leave jars of my urine around for them because I don't want them to come here. But still, I do respect you, Cenobites, wherever you might be. And Rachel, what did you make of our ending? I'm sure you were very happy to see Leroy come back to life.
Well, yes, as a dog lover, yeah. Although, who names a King Cavalier Spaniel? That's like a fancy schmancy dog, Leroy. Uh, anyway, yeah, I mean, yes, it's good that Gallagher gets what's coming to him, presumably because he was telling Alex earlier, he's like, you can't kill me, you'd have to destroy this vessel. That's the only way to get rid of me. So presumably the puppets knew exactly what to do to dismember Gallagher's body to make sure that he does not come back. I read that when he's hanging from the top of the elevator and Blade is cutting off his fingers, that they made the liquid squirting out of the fingers green instead of red, because having it be red would have bumped up like the severity as far as like the rating level on the movie, which why the fingers getting cut off and squirting versus all the sex and everything would have it more mature ratings beyond me. But honestly, I just assumed that his blood was green because he technically wasn't alive. That maybe that was part of the essentially you're zombifying yourself, and so I just assumed that that's why it was green and not red. But yeah, the ending is what it is. It's one of those where it's like, okay, yeah, we got a couple survivors, great. Presumably she's gonna continue her parents' wish and keep her parents' business going, and now she's got a dog to keep her company. The end. Like I was saying earlier, it's like they left some things, some doors, or maybe at least some windows cracked for stuff to come back in future films, but it doesn't. So why bother? Why tie it up in a nice tiny bow instead, and let's just move on. I mean, the sequel is going to be several years after this, I believe. So some time passes, but still, it's like, if you do your work and to pick up any of these threads you left dangling, you should have just either tied them off or tied them in a bow or something.
You make a great point, which is it's the same, I think, contention that Zan had when it came to Saw. It's like, if you just watch this film, I don't want to necessarily have to watch the sequels to have everything else explained to me. So that is a good point for sure. Regardless, I will definitely check out Puppet Master 2 and see what happens next. And it does sadden me a little bit to see that Megan is not going to be an ongoing character. But that said, Keith, what did you make of how this first movie came to a close?
I mean, it's a B movie. It's terrible. What do you expect? It's not Oscar worthy. If the Razzies were a thing, this would have won all the Razzie awards because of how terrible it was. And you guys are missing like the most obvious, like, random whatever is the green goo is from Reanimator or Reanimator 2, because he injects green goo into all the zombie bodies. So there was a tie-in before tie-ins were even a thing, and they probably didn't think of that.
So Lovecraft is a thing in this film. Yes.
I mean, it probably wasn't, but the fact that I'm watching Green Goo, I'm like, oh, it's the same shit he uses in Reanimator. Oh, wait a minute, that's wild.
You've got Green Goo and you've got Barbara Crampton. Yeah, you're there. You got Reanimator.
Yeah, right. I'm there. We got there without even getting there. I will say the puppets in the hotel do play a huge part in the Puppet Master universe. But yeah, a lot of these characters are very interchangeable. And from one movie to another, you occasionally do get like a reference or they make, some callback. But when they get to Like the third one, it's essentially like a whole retcon, like, hey, this is how we got to this point, as I mentioned before. So this is one of those they didn't expect it to do as well as it did on home video, I'm guessing. And then they were like, well, shit, we need a sequel because the sequel came out a year later, and then the third one came out, I think, like 2 years after that. So it's like they were really banging these guys out back to back to back. Oh, I just have to double check. They take that back. They came out. One was 89, one's 90, one's 91. So they really kind of marched this story along pretty furiously. I will say it does eventually go off the rails, like any movie of this genre does. If you guys think this is crazy, wait until you watch Puppet Master versus Demon Toys. That is spectacularly terrible and a sci-fi special. And I mean sci-fi the channel, not sci-fi as in science fiction.
I want to watch the one with Udo Kier. That's the one I'm looking forward to.
It's
There
on
you
Tubi.
go. I love Udo, and rest in peace, Udo, because he did brilliant things regardless. You know, he was in Barbed Wire, he was in Blade, he was in tons of great things. So definitely, we love you very much, Udo, wherever you might be at this point. But yeah, and I was right. I'm pleased that's exactly the vibe I got initially when I saw the green goo coming out of the fingers. I'm like, is this Reanimator? Because, like I said, coming freshly off my Lovecraft fugue, I'm like, could this be the connection? Because now at this point, I find connections with Lovecraftian lore in every other horror movie I watch. That said, the ending of this, I think, feels very true to the kind of story it's telling, but it's not especially generous to the viewer because it doesn't aim for closure in the usual sense. Instead, it leans to ambiguity and leaves things slightly unresolved. You don't get a clean emotional payoff or a clear sense that the situation has been fully dealt with. If anything, it suggests the opposite. That what's been set in motion isn't something that can be neatly contained. And there is a quiet, lingering quality to it. Rather than ending on a big moment, it settles into a kind of uneasy stillness. And that choice fits the film's overall tone. The story has always been more about atmosphere than resolution, so the ending does stay consistent with that approach. At the same time, it can feel a bit abrupt. There is a sense that things stop rather than conclude. And for some viewers, that works because it keeps the mystery alive. For others, it might come across as underdeveloped, like the film pulls back just when it could have said a bit more. What it does well, I think, is reinforce the central idea that control is fragile. The final impression isn't about victory or defeat, but about continuation. Something persists quietly beyond the frame, and that's the note it chooses to leave you with. So, yes, I definitely wanted more, and I was kind of tempted, like Zan, to watch Puppet Master 2, but other things came up, and I'm like, okay, I will watch you eventually. But I think it is fitting for the tone of the film. So, as Keith, that was a great segue from Keith, because let's get to If We Were the Academy segment. This film was not nominated for anything because it was ineligible being direct-to-video, but had it been eligible, it would have been for, of course, the 1990 Academy Awards, where Driving Miss Daisy was the film with the most nominations and the most awards. So, Rachel, starting with you, do you think that Puppet Master should have been nominated for anything at that particular edition of the Academy Awards?
No. Not necessarily because this is like, a bad movie. It's not gonna hold a candle to the movie that I think should have got a lot of nominations and walked away with the big awards, and that is Do the Right Thing. Every time we circle around this year, and it's like, oh yeah, Driving Miss Daisy, and I'm over here going, yeah, because that is one of those years where the Academy just absolutely had an opportunity to do something, as far as giving a spotlight to a film that says something very important, done by a very skilled director. The fact that Spike Lee has still gotten, at this point, he has gotten the miscongeniality equivalent instead of the best picture or best director. It frustrates me to no end. So, I mean, this is not really the Academy's thing anyway. They don't really do horror, and especially not like this. Obviously, in the past few years, we've gotten some, obviously, Silence of the Lambs was a big one. There's been some recognition of not necessarily like straight up horror like this, where it's very formulaic. But we've seen, nods and awards given out to people like, this most recent Academy Awards for Sinners. And, we had a number of more horror-esque films get nominated, like Frankenstein. We've seen Guillermo del Toro walk away with awards, and his is very kind of this is his style is a bit, I think, maybe a bit more Lovecraftian. But still he's got some horror elements. So it's not that the Academy is completely against it. It's just it's not their bread and butter as far as handing out awards. And this, it's so formulaic that even if it was a halfway decent done movie, it's not unique necessarily. It's not anything special. Not really. It's not something that really stands out, especially considering the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of similar low budget horror movies that had come out the years before that and have come out since.
Wise words indeed, and yes, of course, to do the right thing. Eventually we will have to definitely talk about that film for sure, because Spike, we love you very, very much, and also knowing that he's a fellow Inter fan, of course, we love him even more. And Keith, getting to you, do you think this film had a chance at the 62nd Academy Awards had it been, eligible?
Not a snowball's chance, unless they had something for practical effects. And because of all the work they did on the puppets, with Pinhead and so on, the Jester. Again, Jester was ridiculous. I want one of them just to sit on my desk. I think that would have been the only possible category they would have won. Everything else, no. Acting was an option in this film, and that was pretty much everybody was here for the paycheck. They didn't care what the story was about. They could have been selling phone books at this point, and they all would have been like, all right, whatever, sure. And then there just happens to be murder puppets. So, maybe effects. Otherwise, everybody else had deserved an award over this movie. And I nominated this movie just so fans know. So, I understand.
You most certainly do. And like I said, and so to be fair, we give every film that is brought to us the opportunity, even though the Academy might not. And Zan, do you think that this film could have been nominated for anything had it been eligible?
No, I don't, because even if there had been a category at this time or ever for puppetry, this is also the year that Meet the Feebles came out. So even if it had been nominated for the one reason we're watching this movie, it still doesn't hold a candle to Meet the Feebles. So this is what you rent after you watch the Oscars. It's not anything you expect to see at the Oscars.
I definitely agree. I mean, it is very unlikely that this film would have landed a nomination at the Academy Awards, even if it had received a proper theatrical run, because as we know, the Oscars tend to favor films with strong visibility, critical backing, and industry support. And, even to Rachel's point, low budget horror, especially in the late 80s, rarely broke through unless it had a major cultural impact or technical leap. Something like The Fly managed it because its effects were groundbreaking, widely recognized, or even An American Werewolf in London even won in makeup for similar reasons. So I think, Puppet Master, while creative, didn't shift the industry in that way. If you do stretch for possibilities, the only category, even to Keith's point, that even remotely fits is Best Makeup, or perhaps a technical category tied to practical effects, because the puppets are memorable, tactile, and well designed for the budget. But compared to what was being recognized at the time, they weren't seen as revolutionary, more like clever and effective within a niche. Obviously, acting, writing, directing, or dare I say Best Picture would have been out of reach. The film wasn't built for that kind of recognition. Its strength is atmosphere and concept, not prestige storytelling. So I think where it does succeed is somewhere the Oscars don't really measure. It became a cult staple, it spawned a long-running franchise and left a lasting imprint on low-budget horror, and that kind of legacy tends to matter more for films like this than awards ever would. So yeah, not a chance in hell. So getting to ratings then, starting with you, Keith, the bringer of today's movie, what do you give Puppet Master out of 10?
Oh, it's going to be a 10 out of 10. You should know this. I'm not going to give it like a weird 5 like some people I know, Nick. It's 10. It's always going to be 10. It's a perfect 10, 100%.
It's always a 10.
Exactly. Even after a couple beers.
Fair enough, good sir. Fair enough. And Zan, what do you give this one?
This one gets a 6 out of 10 for me. It earns a lot of points for nostalgia. Paul Matt. Let's not forget Paul Matt won 2 Golden Globes. Okay. He can do it when he wants to do it. He can bring it when he wants to bring it. And puppets, Puppet Hellraiser. You know, it has endearing moments, so it gets a 6 for me.
Fair enough. And Rachel, what do you give this one?
I'm giving it 6.5. Like I said, it's not anything to write home about. I mean, obviously, it's an '80s, late '80s horror slasher, type classic.
But it's better than How Green Was My Valley.
Exactly. I would still rather watch this over How Green Was My Valley. Any day.
I want to see a doctor for that Green Valley.
You need an ointment for that.
Stop picking at it.
Yeah. Or some bloodletting.
Exactly. I'm actually with Rachel on this one. I'm also going to give it a 6.5 out of 10. And I think what pulls it up is the concept and the atmosphere. The idea is simple but effective, and the film knows how to stretch it. You know, the puppets themselves carry a lot of the weight. They're distinct, they're memorable, they're handled with just enough restraint to stay eerie. And there's also, as I said before, a handmade quality to everything that works in its favor. It feels very tangible. Where it loses points, as you guys mentioned, is in pacing and depth. It can feel slow without always building towards something stronger, and the characters aren't developed enough to fully invest in. You're more interested in the setup than the people experiencing it. So ultimately, I'd say it ends up in that middle space. Not a standout in terms of craft or storytelling, but absolutely solid as a mood-driven, low-budget horror piece. It's the kind of film I think you remember more for the idea and the imagery than for how tightly it's put together. So it's a 6.5 out of 10 for me, so it won't have to go to summer school. So getting to a gold standard feedback this week, we have some from the ever wonderful Dave Proctor. So Zan, what does Dave have for us this week?
Yes, the wonderful and ever diplomatic Dave Proctor. Dave says, "Hello, cinephiles. First, let me say thank you for putting another movie into the Have Watched section of Dave's Letterboxd and IMDb profiles. Not that I was running short, but through my podcast listening, I have discovered a lot of movies I would have otherwise missed. This movie was so far off my radar and so far behind me that I probably would never have known it existed. I don't know if it enriches my life, but one should seek new experiences that are new. Not my center target genre of choice, but not alone on my list either. I must admire any product produced that allows someone to make a living on. I'm glad this movie, director, writer, and the cast got paid, and I hope it went on to keep them fed. I will refrain from a rating, but I will say I don't regret watching it. It was entertaining. Thanks, Dave Proctor." And back to The Simpsons, I just hope both teams have fun. Yes, I've never made, as bad as movies can be sometimes, I've never made one. I've never made a movie. So kudos to people who put together making a movie. And like I said, Charles Band has done some great bad movies that I love. So I hope it keeps them fed. I agree with you on that one, Dave.
100% agreed. And thank you so much, Dave, for your feedback. And of course, dear listeners, if you want to be like the wonderful Dave and share your thoughts on the films we discuss here, you can shoot an email to goldstandardoscars@gmail.com. Once again, goldstandardoscars@gmail.com. Be sure to follow us on our social media. If you're not doing so already, you can find us on X as Oscars Gold, Facebook as Gold Standard The Oscars Podcast, and Blue Sky, where we're also at Oscars Gold. We love hearing from you guys and appreciate the follow and the support. Also, if you'd like to hear us discuss your favorite movies, you can join our wonderful family of patrons on Patreon and check out what's going on there. You also get to unlock our previous reviews of such films selected by our patrons, such as recently Prey, Captain Phillips, Sense and Sensibility, The Illusionist, and many more. So to join our Golden Army, head on over to patreon.com/goldstandardoscars. And a big thank you to our wonderful patrons for their support. Speaking of which, this month, our patrons have selected Finding Neverland, our second Foster film, after having, of course, discussed Stranger Than Fiction for us to review, so we'll see what we make of that. Also, regardless of the platform you're listening to this podcast on, be it Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pandora, be sure to rate and review us, as that keeps the algorithm stimulated and allows our little podcast to reach more like-minded ears like yours. As always, tell your friends, tell your enemies, tell your pets, tell your puppets. We don't care. Just spread the good word. Big thank you to those who have done so. Future thank you to those who will. So, when it comes to our esteemed guest, Mr. Bliss, when you're not here gracing us with your presence in the Gold Standard Theatre, where can folks find you on those everlasting and ever-reaching interwebs?
Apparently, it's torturing Dave Proctor because I've inflicted some wild movies on that poor man. So you're welcome, and I'm sorry. The check's in the mail for your therapy session. So, when I'm not doing that, I'm on some silly podcast, what is it called? Happiness and Darkness, I think. I don't know. I do this thing from time to time with some guy named Nick. And when I'm not there, apparently I'm on like 782 other podcasts. But, for the most part, you can find me on our Facebook page. You can always reach out through the Happiness and Darkness page, either through post, comment, message, smoke signal, lions, tigers, bears, hey, whatever.
Fantastic stuff for sure. And Rachel, where can folks find you?
Well, you can find me with the Five-ish Fingers podcast. We're a usually weekly pop culture and entertainment podcast where we talk about all sorts of geeky and nerdy things from the female perspective, because fangirls are real fans too. You can always find us wherever you get podcasts, and whenever I get this episode edited, it'll be in the feeds. So, end of the school year, very, very busy. Plus, I'm taking on extra work to pad the old bank account, especially now because we have an extra mouth to feed. So, thankfully, he does not eat a whole lot. Anywhere you find podcasts, and at the fiveishfangirls.com, where you connect with all of our podcast-related social media accounts and our individual ones as well, which I highly recommend doing because this weekend is Indie PopCon and all the fun stuff on the interwebs.
Awesome indeed. And dulcis in fundo, as the Latins would say. Zan, where can folks find you?
You can find me with our friend Charles Skaggs on our podcast, Drunk Cinema, where we watch our favorite movies over our favorite adult beverages, discuss them, and record that discussion for your entertainment. You can find those wherever podcasts are found. And if you're looking for me on social media, your best bets would be Instagram, TikTok, or Letterboxd. Apparently, I lost my Blue Sky account. I don't know what's up with that. Thank you again, Dave Proctor, for letting me know about that. But those are the three best places if you're trying to look for me on social media.
Fantastic stuff for sure. And when it comes to myself, folks, if you're in a country music kind of mind, you can check me out on my regular job, the Whiskey and Cigarettes show, where we play the very best and nothing but the best of country music for you guys, from Alabama to Bailey Zimmerman. And for more information about that, you can visit our website, which is whiskeyandcigarettesshow.com. Podcast-wise, as of course Keith was kindly mentioning, you can find myself and his awesome self on Happiness and Darkness, a superhero movie podcast, where we do discuss any and every superhero movie under the sun. We recently had a blast discussing Aztec Batman, which was a first view for both of us. Coming up next, we're going to be staying in DC territory, as we'll be reviewing Catwoman Hunted. So another animated movie featuring, of course, Selena Kyle, and looking forward to that for sure. As well, a good time with my mate Keithy. And last but certainly not least, speaking of Skaggs, as we talked about in this podcast, You can find myself and Charles Skaggs on the Fandom Zone podcast, where we're currently reviewing the second season of Daredevil, Born Again Season 2, and very much looking forward to it, as we will be currently discussing the finale, which I've yet to see, but I've been told it's really good. So looking forward to it. And speaking of things to come on this show, next time we'll be reviewing a film that Zan picked, and that will be the 1982, the year I personally drew breath, the Don Bluth film, The Secret of Nim. So first off, Keith, thank you so much for joining us today. It was a joy having you on. And of course, we look forward to having you back on behalf of myself, Rachel, and Zan with more of your movie selections.
Anytime, I'm always around here to torture you guys with horrifically bad movies and sometimes a good gem like, Sky Captain. So I hope to hear from you guys soon.
Oh, you
Thanks
know
for
I
having
love
me.
bad movies. I always love it when you're here.
I try. I got to bring, the IQ down in the room just because you guess are very highbrow.
Oh, I guess
The Oscars is highbrow. It's not us.
Yeah, fair, touche.
I guess, we might have you fooled there. So, Rachel and Zan, anything else you would like to add on our upcoming movie or anything else before we sign off?
I guess it's my turn to apologize because I'm bringing a very good movie, but wow, is it it is a childhood trauma classic.
Rachel, are you familiar with this one? Oh, you muted, Rachel.
She just doesn't want to talk to you guys.
I don't. I'm getting emotional already. Because it's a Don Bluth film. There's going to be trauma. There's going to be tears. That's all there is to it. It's just, it's just an automatic given. The man likes to make us cry and give childhood trauma.
He's so good at it, though. He does it so beautifully,
I'll never get over Littlefoot's mother.
Nobody's ever going to get over Littlefoot's mother. And, I was, 18 when the movie came out? I'm still having nightmares about Rasputin.
So I guess we'll all trauma bond together when we talk about this one. So, of course, folks, thanks as always for the show and supporting us. We'll see you next time with The Secret of Nim on Patreon with Finding Neverland. Until then, enjoy those movies. Keep that popcorn hot. Big thank you, of course, to Mr. Keith Bliss for joining us. Big thank you to Dave for writing in. And Nora, thank you all so much for the privilege of your time. Ciao, my people.